I only ever employ young people because younger people have space in their head still to take on new ideas, new thinking, new process. 95% of everything I tell you will distrust. If you're out there want to do something, you don't need to know how to do it. Just find the guys how to know how to do it and plug them all together. The second smartest man, people have no anxiety. People don't find you a threat. People lower their guard and tell you everything you want to know. Best way to build a brand in anything is give it away and let the rest of the world build it for you.
Rick, I'm super excited for this week's episode of the Silicon Valley Podcast. Before we start, I really got to thank Craig Keegan, who made the introduction for today's episode. If it wasn't for Craig is a M&A advisor out in Australia. He has a lot of courses on helping people through the M&A process, so check him out. I'll have his LinkedIn in the show notes. But I want to thank Craig first for making the introduction before we start. And Rick, for the audience out there, happy birthday. Thanks for taking the time today to be here on your birthday.
Well, thanks, mate. Thanks for a great birthday present.
Now, before we dive into the challenging questions, which I'm guessing are going to be softballs for you. I mean, you're a pro at this. I've listened to some of your stuff online. Can you give our audience a little bit of background of your career, of your accomplishments, what you've done up until this point?
Okay, so I started in the age of 18. I was very lucky to be employed by a guy called Alan Pease, who at the time, unbeknownst to me, was writing the very, very first book on body language. And I worked with him for a number of years, and being such a young guy, I absorbed everything. And I got to learn all about body language and talk language and subliminal sciences and all these sort of things. And they sort of became a part of me until later on, I ended up in the United States by a pure accident, by the way. That was crazy. I wrote a song called Big Bad Baz in Australia, and then the Bush people asked if they could license it for Big Bad Bush for the Bush campaign, and then they asked me if I'd come over and voice it. So I ended up doing that. Anyway, bottom line was I ended up in the US, meeting a girl, getting married, who she had told me how to get some money, and then, of course, I started the We Buy Houses organization there in Dallas, Texas, buying properties from the RTC, which was the federal government. And that thing took off, and here we are 35 years later, and that little puppy's all around the world now.
Okay, there was so much there that we got to unpack. I mean, one, We Buy Houses, it's a brand that I think everyone has seen while driving. I can't imagine someone who hasn't. But even before that, one, I like how it was accidentally arrived in the U.S. But the science of communication, can you dive a little bit deeper in it? I mean, you've built a reputation around the science of communication, or subliminal science. What is that exactly? How does it work in everyday selling?
Okay, so the way we communicate, the way you and I are communicating right now, is 7% of our communication are the words we use, 38% is the tonality of those words, but 55% is what's called subliminal science. These are the messages that we're sending to each other at a level below conscious awareness. So body language was one of those. Body language comes under this party of subliminal science where you can look at the body language of your wife and you can say, babe, why do I know you're angry at me? And you're getting the hunch, your gut feeling. You don't know at a conscious level how to interpret it, but you're picking up all the signals. That's what subliminal science is.
So then how can you use subliminal science, or, I mean, how do you sell without saying a word? You have a book. It's turning traditional sales techniques on its head, but what inspired the approach? How can you share a memorable example of it in action?
Okay, so what happened was, because I started the We Buy Houses business and went every years and years and years, and then people would kind of know a little bit about my background, and people would say, well, Rick Otton doesn't just teach people how to do a property transaction, he changes the entire surrounds of what's going on, that people just want to do the transaction. And it was bringing in all these subliminal science elements. So to get you at a very basic level, I'm going to give you a couple of examples, right? If I'm standing on your front doorstep, knock on the door, you open the door and I'm wiping my feet, the fact that you see me wiping my feet on the mat, you're more likely to say, oh, come on in. And you'll invite me in because I've given you a subliminal message to invite me in, by wiping my feet on the doormat. Okay? So let me go to the next step. But we agree that when we do sales and marketing or any business, people have got to like you before they'll buy from you.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay,
Of course.
great. So if I'm in your property, I'll come to your house, I know there's one room in the house and only one room only where you'll entertain friends, and that's the kitchen. In actual fact, it's a territory owned by the female, but what happens is every room within a house has a different vibe, a different energy. It means a different thing. So I've got to become your friend before you'll do business with me. Because I'm on a time frame and I've got to get in and out of that house within an hour, I've got to get you to like me. So what I've got to do is I've got to structure the meeting in the kitchen. At a subliminal level, you'll say, well, if he's in my kitchen, he's my friend. And so I've just immediately got you to be my friend by being in your kitchen. Now, how I get into the kitchen, there's a number of techniques because I'll walk in, I'll be in the living room, which is where people normally put you. I'll go in and get a glass of water. Mrs. Smith always owns the kitchen. She's going to come straight back in to help me get that glass of water because I'm in her territory. And then, of course, Mr. Smith will come bouncing in because I'm in the kitchen with his wife. So, but right there, I've put us in what's called the friend environment, although it's not the right room to do business. But the other thing is too, we jump from that to rooms and territories. We run into this is stuff most of us don't even know. Every time I'm having a conversation with anybody, there's a territory line. If we sit at a table, there's a territory line. What we do at a subconscious level, we break down and say, this half is mine, that half is yours. This half is mine, that half is yours. If we sit down at a table, you'll take ownership of half the table, okay? And you won't let me come into your half the table. In actual fact, if I put the salt on the table and move it 1 inch into your half, at a subliminal level, your hand will reach out and push it back to the middle. Now, you understand how powerful this is, okay? If I'm having a conversation with you or a girl or anybody in business, I will never stand opposite you and have a conversation because there's a territory line in the middle and acts like a net playing tennis, and you'll disagree with me half the time and bat things across the net. I'll always stand next to you. When I stand next to you, I've moved the territory line. So you and I are now on the same side of the net. Then there's the territory line, and then there's the other objects. Suddenly, you'll feel connected with me. And if you're left-handed and I stand to your right, every time you gesture with your left hand, I gesture with my right hand. You don't know why, but you just like me. I'm a really cool dude. You feel like we're singing from the same song sheet. That builds an environmental cocoon. If I stand on the wrong side of you, you'll argue with me because our arms become a barrier. You don't know why, but you feel we have nothing in common.
That's crazy. So, most of our listeners, entrepreneurs, investors, how should they then approach a office room when there's a standard square table and maybe the person even signals to them, oh, there's your seat across?
Yeah. So let's say you walk into a board. Let's go oblong table. Okay. If it's an oblong table, the most powerful position on an oblong table or a rectangle table is at the end of the table looking at the door. So at the far end of the room, in that position, look at the door. That's the most powerful person in the room. So what happens quite often is if I go to a boardroom, people will open the boardroom and say, Mr. Otton, please feel free to take a seat. I'll go and sit at the head of the table. And they don't know why, but they're thinking, I don't know what I'll just sit and say, gentlemen, please feel free. And I'll put my hands out. Now people are sitting down in the subservient positions beneath me because I've taken the power seat. But people don't understand what's just happened because it's at a subliminal level. The second most important, powerful position in a boardroom table is the other end, the head of the table, where you've got your back to the door. You understand? And then you'll find the subservient people all sit along the sides. So there's great positions like that. In a square table, what you want to do is, if I'm meeting people in an office and I want to encourage you to give me feedback and everything you're thinking, because I'm just interested in what you have to say, I'll never sit you at a square table. We'll sit at a round table. In a round table, no one has sides. There's no power position on a round table.
Yeah, I was just at a networking event in Vegas, and they had a deal-making session where you had 20-minute meetings with everyone.
Uh-huh.
and it was at round tables. And
Right.
just thinking about it, it always seemed like, oh, we only met each other for 20 minutes, but we got to connect in that short amount of time. Where then at the breakfast area where there was the queue and the line and the food, that person on the other side of that line, you're thinking, oh, are they going to reach over to my side to grab the spoon for the buffet to reach? And there was that divide. It's interesting.
So in all the years I've had conventions and conferences, right, I've always put the people on a round table, and here's why. If I try to tell people things from the stage, I understand that we got what's called the inner cynic, which 95% of everything I tell you will distrust. You'll only believe 5% of what I say. It's called the inner cynic. You've had it since the age of 7. You believe 100% of what you say, but you question the validity of 95% of what I say. That's why I always put people on round tables at conventions, and I always say to people, come up, you people on the table, come up with the 3 best ways you know of on how to do this. And they actually solve the problems themselves, because I can't tell them how to solve the problem, because they're going to go, how do we know this guy's not full of crap? But when people do it on a round table and then they tell me the solutions to the problems, all I did was lead them to where to go.
What about for a conference seating where it's normally all rows facing the stage? Is that good, or should that be a horseshoe, or should that be a different angle?
It depends. It depends on whether you're there to sell something, or whether you're there to educate, or there to facilitate. One of the things that I always do is I know that when strangers sit next to each other, they go through a state of anxiety and people will shut down. As people shut down, it's very hard for me to impart information to you when I've sat you next to a foreigner, because you've got a human body, you've got human zones. We have 3 zones. The first zone is from 0 to 3 inches. We only allow our family and we only allow our lover within 3 inches of our body. The next 12 inches is what's called the friend zone. We only allow friends. Outside of that, it's strangers. So when I sit you on those chairs, I'm allowing people to invade your zones who have no permission to be there. You will shut down. I can't impart information because you won't take it. You can't be in a state of anxiety as well as make decisions about stuff. So what I always do, and people don't understand it, people say if you go to Rick Otton's show, it's like a big comedy show. If I make you laugh, what it does is it breaks down the anxiety, but now it gives you something in common with someone you don't know sitting next to you. So when you both laugh at the joke, you both look at each other and go, isn't he funny? Ha, ha, ha. And you'll start bonding with each other, right? And I'm also breaking down the anxiety. So that was done. It's done deliberately. So if I go into a convention, I'm riding a horse, or I come in dressed up as a pig, something crazy, it makes everybody burst out laughing and go, can you believe this guy? He's dressed up as a pig. I'm doing it deliberately to change the environment within that room.
How much of a pre-scripted kind of walkthrough is there for you at conferences, at events, or meetings where it's, okay, these first 5-10 minutes, I'm always doing this pattern, this process to...
Okay, so whenever I have any sort of an event, in order for you to take on information, if I want to educate you, I've got to explain to you how your brain works. If I don't do that, it's going to be, you're only going to take on board about 15% of what I say. You're going to fight me the whole time. You're going to fight me because you're going to go, that's not how I've heard it before. That's not what my grandmother said. People have 11 scripts. They're all subliminal scripts going as to why they're going to fight my information. First thing is I draw a big round circle on a board and I say, what's that? People say it's an egg. I say it's your head. And then I start to explain to you in very simple language how you start receiving information from the time you're 0, okay? And where that information goes. And then when I teach you how information goes into your head and what part goes where, so I can tell you which part of your brain stress goes to, which part of your brain's passion goes to, which part of your brain. So it's like a shopping center, and I show people how their brain works and how it takes in information. When I do that, people get a massive aha moment because no one's done that. And so they're more open-minded to understand what I do and the way I do it because I've given them the right? But I've got to do that if I want to set that environment up.
It's incredible. So with all this, going back, there's another thing that you'd mentioned at the very beginning, found in We Buy Houses.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about that? And could you also mention how did the science communication play into the success of that?
Okay, so I did something in business. I've always done things which are very different, but I've got to tell something people don't know. The two greatest things that ever happened to me in my life was meeting a guy called Alan Pease when I was 18, and he introduced me to body language, all these things that never existed, okay? And I remember the first 10 years after the body language book came out, that's now sold 19 million copies, for the first 10 years, Alan Pease would get booed off stage because when he talked about body language, people would go, "You're an idiot, you're a moron, that's all woo-woo, crazy stuff." But now...
They would really yell that from the audience.
Oh, God, yeah. Because you're saying to people, look, when you fold your arms, it does this. When you move your things, when you stroke the side of your neck out here 5 times, right? You're lying when you're doing that 3 times, or where your finger goes, all this stuff. People have never heard this before. So when you put new information onto a brain and there's been no anchoring information, you can't anchor it to anything, it's a scam, it's a rip-off, and it's a fraud because your brain looks for anchoring information. There is no anchoring information. This body language is new. It must be scammy because if it was legitimate, I'd know something about it by now. That's how it is. I don't know how we went down there, but okay. So here's the other thing about me. When I was born a spastic. Do you know what a spastic is? Okay, I had a mental illness. I had no logic system. My mother tells me this because I was too young to know. I was a baby. They're going to put me in a rubber room. My logic system, the two sides of my brain didn't talk to each other. Okay? Now, we have the left side of the brain, the right side of the brain, and it passes information like this, okay, across the brain. Mine was all screwed up. The doctor at the time, after about 6 weeks, he tried something new. He put a plunger, according to my mum, in the bottom of my spine to drain a lot of fluid out of my head, and it reconnected the logic components of my brain, right? But here's what happened. When they went back together differently. So they find solutions to problems, but they go a different path than what most people. So if I said to you, give me 2 numerals that add to 6, you'll go 2 plus 4, 3 plus 3, 5 plus 1. But my brain goes 7 less 1. But we both end up at 6, but we get there different ways. Do you understand? So there's a lot of things in business I do where people go, how the hell did you get that result? I get the result. I just get there on a different path. So when I did the We Buy Houses thing, I started that and I wanted to build that into a monster around the world, right? And I thought, well, hang on. Everybody said trademark. And I said, no, if you trademark it, I'll spend my entire life trying to fight my trademark, right? The best way to build a brand in anything is give it away and let the rest of the world build it for you. Because here's what happens. That thing's across the world now. I've taught thousands of people everything I know. I tell them everything, right? But at the end of the day, when something happens or someone calls me to a government department, they kind of call me in because you're that guy. And so now I'm doing something that's never been done before in the history of the world, right? I don't know if you're the biggest shift that we're seeing right now in business that all entrepreneurs should take. The West is moving out of the West and it's moving east and it's getting away from the legacy countries, high taxation, high compliance. It's all going into Asia, the Middle East, South America. Everybody's moving, right? So much so that places like Australia next year will start exit taxes, and a couple of the European countries are already charging exit taxes if you leave Europe to live elsewhere, right? Because too many people living. But here's the interesting, I'm a property guy, right? I did the We Buy Houses thing. Asia and the Middle East and everything else doesn't have financing and debt instruments to buy property. You have to pay cash. But everybody moving out of America, England and Australia, they want to buy a villa, a condo, a house. But they haven't got cash because all the Western countries, we've always got home loans, right? So I had to sit down and devise how to create financing and loans for the East and for the Middle East, like Dubai, so that everybody moving out from the West can start getting financing to buy houses at the East.
That's interesting. I mean, wouldn't you have to change the laws there as well? You'd change the laws,
No,
the
no.
no?
Here's your deal. You read the law, and with every law I've found around the world, there's always different ways you can apply it, which are very legal. You just apply it a different way. So no, you don't change. You never change the law. Just stay within the law. Just apply it in a different way.
Well, in that situation, aren't there people almost booing on stage, going, "No, you can't give these debt instruments. You can't loan them money. It's not the way we've ever done business before." Or are
I
they
would
really
say,
open?
Sean, what you've been saying to me right now, I've heard that for the last 30 years in just about every country I've been into. When I went into Greece in 2014 and the austerity where Greece collapsed and I wanted to bring all this stuff in, the Greeks said, this has never happened. But you're talking about Greece where the check title, they don't check titles electronically. They go through all the old manuscript scrolls all the way back to 1452, and it takes 3 months to change title because it's done manually. They still go through all the book records for hundreds of years. England, every country I've been to tells me what you can't do.
Okay, then where do you see all the opportunities for entrepreneurs in those countries that you just mentioned, or where do you see the
Massive.
opportunities for entrepreneurs in coming years?
Yeah, because I call it immigrant thinking. When you take ideas from the West and you go to the East or the Middle East or somewhere else, you'll find there are many things that other countries don't do the way you do it. If you look at any country in the world, the richest group of people are the first group of immigrants because they come in with processes, ideas and thinking from their previous country that wasn't in the standard country. When I started doing property in the United States back in the late 80s, and I went to buy apartment buildings, they used to always have one girl in one apartment who sat there all day, and she took the maintenance requests and collected the rent checks from all the people in the building. When I got there, I said, why doesn't everybody just pay electronic? Give everybody a form and they can pay electronically. And all the landlords in Dallas said, there's no way that would work in America. That's no way. Today, everybody in America pays electronically, right? When I was there, everyone would have like a saltwater swimming pool. I said, forget it. Make them all seawater pools. You don't need to have filtration equipment. You don't have to spend $5,000 a month on engineering and licenses and blah, blah, blah. But it just wasn't done that way. So all countries, the opportunity for entrepreneurs is to go into a foreign country and look at how they do a process and simply do it differently.
Are you working on that right now with any specific country?
Yes. So I have Bali property financed, and I've brought into Indonesia the first financing because Bali and Dubai are the two fastest growing property markets in the world today. So I brought financing into Bali so that when people are buying properties in Bali, they now get financing, whereas before they had to get cash. Now, I'm now in Thailand because the next country, there's Thailand property financed, Cambodia property financed, Vietnam property financed, and then I think in October, I've been invited into Dubai to bring financing into Dubai. But that's just my bag. That's just my little bag, right?
That doesn't sound like that little of a bag to me. That sounds pretty incredible.
Yeah, well, it's exciting. You don't do it for the money. You do it for the excitement. I mean, really, it's the kind of thing that just gets exciting. And while we're on it, do you want me to tell you a couple of other changes that business should be doing that business is not doing?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Let me tell you two things. If you're an entrepreneur or a businessman, that will make you $1 zillion, right? Okay. When you hire people, could we agree that you hire people for two reasons, for skills and for attitude?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. The thing is, you can always teach skills. You can't teach attitude. The biggest problem companies have is they have HR departments interviewing people to get the people with the right attitude. You understand? And then they're going to teach them skills. Here's a far more efficient way to employ people without ever meeting anybody. I've been doing this for years. What you do is you run your ad in Indeed.com for all the people who want a job. When they run the ad, you have an autoresponder that says, congratulations, I got your applications. Please watch these 3 videos on YouTube. You give them 3 videos to watch on YouTube. Then they come back and they say they've watched the 3 videos. Then you say, great, please answer these questions on those 3 videos. For most people, they've got to go back and watch the 3 videos again. 30% of the people will drop out there. They're not going to do it. A whole bunch of people will then send you that they've done that. Then I congratulate them and I tell them they now work for the company. Now, here's 3 more videos, and I send them videos on the skill set that they have to learn that's already on YouTube. Like how to fall in love with a kneecap, there's probably a video on YouTube. There's a video for everything. I set this up when I was in Portugal, buying and selling houses in Atlanta, Georgia. I've never been to Atlanta, Georgia in my life, but I needed to automate the whole thing. So I employed all my American staff off YouTube. Then the people go, they learn the skill set on the YouTube. Then I send them a list of questions, okay? Here's my point. Only 10% of people will go through all this pain in the ass crap, but you've got the people with the best attitude you'll ever employ for the rest of your life. Those people will work for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've got a girl called Catherine who was my operations manager out of North Carolina. To this day, I've never met her. But I
originally working remote, so
but that's the first thing. That's the first golden nugget. Okay, that people should think about chucking away their HR departments and doing that, and getting people to employ themselves through this YouTube, and that sorts out the attitude real fast. Right? I don't actually speak to the person until they've been through the system. So the 90% of people I never get to speak to. Now, here's the next thing. If people want to build their business real fast, you've heard of social media, right? You're very good at it?
Not the best. I think I can improve.
Okay. Do you spend money on it?
No.
Okay. So here's the deal. Most guys are like you, like me. I don't know social media, and I'm not going to spend a fortune on it, right? But you got to have it. Here's how you build your brand. Because we talked about the brand, how do I build We Buy Houses? I gave the thing away, right? Here's the next way you build a brand. Who do you think knows everything about a social media? A 20-year-old kid. So what I do is I go on a TikTok, I find a 20-year-old kid who's all over social media. He's got social media this and social media that. And I say, listen, my name's Rick Otton. Look at me on the internet. Find out who I am. I'm going to take you from nothing to something, and I'm going to give you my 35 years in the market for absolutely free, because it's time that I pay it forward and give back the same way as somebody gave to me 35, 45 years ago. What do you think that kid now thinks?
I think he'd be excited. He's like, okay, what does he want?
So much so he tells every single person in the entire planet Earth 3 times a day, oh my God, I'm working with Rick Otton, and he's done this for me, and he's bought me a house, and he showed me how to do that. And what do you reckon those 9,000 followers or 300,000 followers have? Who's Rick Otton? How do we find out more about Rick Otton? Oh my God, this guy's famous, blah, blah. So that kid builds my brand all around the world, and all I had to do was give back to a kid and not charge him. I don't have to learn about social media. The kid at 20 knows about social media. I can't keep up with a 20-year-old. All I got to do is make that kid a star, and he'll make me a star by default. Do you understand?
That's genius. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything like that before.
Well, that's why you got me on the podcast, right?
Of course. But now I'm going to ask you for more tidbits of wisdom.
Okay, so here's more tidbits of wisdom, right? If you're going to employ staff, because I had lots of staff, first thing you do when I employ staff, if someone comes to work for me within 1 week, the first week, they've got to write their employment manual exactly how their job works, exactly because if for some reason they leave me, get sick or whatever, I can drop anybody else. I give them the manual and say, follow that. Most people don't do that, so that when a person leaves a job or gets fired or gets sick, another girl from another department has to come in and teach somebody else and she doesn't know what to do and you've got to bring temporary workers. No, I get everybody to build an operations manual and show it to me within their first 5 days. Why within their first 5 days? If you get them to do it in 3 months' time, they won't do it. But you get them to do it within the first 3 days or 5 days,
But
right?
how would they even know in the first 5 days what they're supposed to do?
Because it's not that hard working for me. Can I just tell you? It's not rocket science. You work for me for a week, really, and you're going to nah. And I'd tell you what, now that was a time when I had 14 staff. I've probably used bots and everything. Like I've just created that we've just been testing in America, actually. I'm really quite excited. You know what real estate agents are, right?
Of course. They're at every event handing you cards with their pictures on them.
So here's what I found out. As I've gone into Asia and the Middle East and other countries, and all the Western countries are buying properties outside of the legacy countries. Everybody's speaking to agents, but no one speaks to the agent on a telephone. They do it all by WhatsApp and email. It's how the world is communicating now. That meant that I could build a whole bunch of real estate agents that are robots, that all they are is bots and AI. All I had to do is teach the language and all the questions that the people ask, which are the same questions all around the world. And I've got Jenny, Bob, Sally, Philip, and George, and they're all just computers. Computers can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't have to pay them commission, and they can answer all the questions. And the person just assumes they're speaking to a person, but they're not. It's all you got to do is just drop the language in. It's like, you got ManyChat on Facebook. You ever heard of this?
No.
Okay. So guess what? AI is so advanced now that AI can actually have a conversation with you.
So Rick, question there with business moving forward. How should a new business kind of think out their team, their processes? Should they think from day one, just using AI and bots for as much as possible, or should they think humans and bots? How should they think about structuring or organizing?
Look, I do two things. Just if I go to a new business, and I do two things. First of all, I don't think you can bring in bots and you can't bring in AI unless you know how the manual system works. So you can't replace a manual system if you don't know how that system works. So I would never automate anything if I don't understand how it was before it was automated, because then I just don't sort of own it. You understand? Right? So you've got to start old school, and then when you're in old school, you get to new school. But here's a couple of things to think about, right? 3 things. When you employ people, I've got a guy who told me this, and I understand it. Entrepreneurs are always young. They never start off old. Entrepreneurs do not start at 40. They don't start at 45. They start at 25 and 30. They have what's called a young brain. Remember how when I was telling you, whenever I speak to groups, I talk about the head and we start filling up the head with process? A young brain has a lot of free space, will take on new process. An old brain has what's called a full head. It can't take on a new process. That's why it's very hard to get entrepreneurial thinking into an older person. So, first of all, only ever employ young people, because younger people have space in their head still to take on new ideas, new thinking, new process, right? Plus, it keeps older guys like me thinking young. The second thing is, I'm never interested in the widget. People always have a widget. They're building something and they're making something. I'm going to suggest to you in business, most businesses get caught up in the process and then they forget the result they're looking to get. So let's say you're doing something. You're doing your investment banking. You're doing whatever you're doing, right? Okay, let me ask you something. What are you doing? What are you doing this investment banking for? And you'll go, blah, 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 blah. So what's the result you want? Blah, 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 blah. And if you had that result, what would that enable you to do? You give me blah, 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 blah. So really what you want to be able to do at the end of the whole thing is blah, 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 blah. Yes. Now that will change every process in an entire company because people get wrapped up in the process, right? And so they go, and I'm going to, exactly, I say, okay, you want to make money. You're doing this to make money. What do you want to make money for? Well, I want to be able to travel the world. So really what you're saying is you're looking for a really efficient way to travel the world. Is that right? Yeah, great. So if you want a really efficient way to travel the world, why don't you go and get a bus license? I'll call Al, and now we're short of bus drivers, and you can be driving the whole world, and he'll pay you to do it. And then, because that's what I did when I was 20. I went and got a bus license when I was at the age of 20 so I could travel the world for free. They made me a bus driver right in Europe. So the thing is, I want to tell you another story real quick. When I got to Dallas in 89, the people in Texas who know Dallas, you got the West End where all the bars are. There's a guy there who employed me. And I said, why do we have this bar? And he said, to sell beer. And I said, do you want to sell beer or make money? What do you think he said?
Make money.
Okay, so really what you want is you want an ATM machine that makes money. The beer is just the widget you've been using to make the money. He said, yes. Great. So why don't we sell 5 times more beer? He said, how do we sell 5 times more beer? I said, first of all, you get rid of all the chairs that are along the front of the bar. Every American bar copies everybody else. They all copy everybody else. They put chairs in front of a bar. All that does is hinder the delivery mechanism by which people can buy beer. As soon as we removed all the chairs from the beer, our drink sales tripled. They tripled because more people could get to the bar and buy more beers. Now, then there's no chairs to sit down on. What do people now have to do?
Stand and drink.
Okay, so when you stand and drink and you're holding a heavy beer, do you think the speed at which people drink increases?
Yep.
Correct. It went up another 2%. We 5x'd the amount of alcohol we sold in that place, which is a profit margin. We turned that whole bar into an absolute ATM money-making machine from hell, and he sold it for an absolute fortune. Because people get caught up in the bars to sell beer rather than the bar is not there to sell beer. The bar is there to make money. But therefore, maybe selling the beer isn't. See where people get locked up in the process?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many businesses out there do you think are failing just because people are locked up in the process?
Yeah, thousands. I always look at widgets all the time. The money is look at the widget going, what's the guy doing? He's making that. Why is he making that? He wants to make money. So really what he wants is a system that makes money. Yeah. But if you want the system to make money, cut that bit out, cut that bit out, cut that bit out, do that. People go, oh, how did you think like that? Because they're looking at the wrong thing. They're looking at the business, but they're not thinking about what is the outcome they want from having the business. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is interesting.
I was with the guy in Ireland. He's got a real estate business, right? And I said, let me ask you something. You're making $200,000 a year. Do you want to make $1 million a year or do you want to make $200,000 a year? He said, I want to make $1 million a year. Okay. But if you've got all this business, why don't we package it up, right? And sell it off in units, right? And then people will make payments on the units with 15% interest. You just keep doing that, boom, package, sell it. Like he's holding all this real estate and I'm going, but if you want the fast money, just restructure, redesign it, and we'll be at $1 million a year. But he was thinking about having the business of real estate rather than asking a different question. Do you want the real estate or do you want the benefits that the real estate provides? And if I ever ask anybody that question, they always want the benefits that the real estate provides. That if you want the benefits from the real estate, rather than just the real estate, it will re-engineer how you do it. Last thing I'm going to tell you, because I'm on a roll, Sean. Okay, I do joint ventures all the time, which people do, but people make a mistake, Sean. People do a 50-50 joint venture with people. Do you understand?
Yep.
If you do a 50-50 joint venture with people, which I used to do, it means I'm still in the deal. It still occupies time in my head. I still have to solve problems. I have to do all the stuff, except I only make 50% of the profit. But I'm still in the game. And all these businesses are renting time, space in my head. They're renting space in my head. Here's what I do with every business. I give the partner 80% and I take 20%.
Okay, why?
It's such an outrageous amount of money that everybody's scared that one day I'll take it away. They never bring me a problem. They only bring me a solution. They never speak to me. They come up with really smart ideas. They learn how to make money really fast. And I don't even think about that business. Don't even think about it. It doesn't rent space in my head. So I can get another business, take 20%, another business, take 20%, another business, and all the people who take the 80% will tell the rest of the planet that the best guy in the world to be in business with is a guy called Rick Otton.
Could you share an example of this or a story?
Yeah. Okay. So right now, as I've said to you, I'm changing the way Asians say buying and selling houses, right? So I said, okay, I said, here's how we're going to plug it all together. I'll get the developers to do that. I'll basically get the developers to do what I want them to do by paying them so much money they can't say no. It's just, okay, that's the first bit, right? The second bit is I then bring in my bots. I still charge the developers 5% commission to sell all their properties around the world, except I'm using electronics to sell them, computers. I'm not actually using a real person, but I'm getting the 5% commission. Okay. Now, so then I brought another guy in and I said, here's how that works. Do you see what that component does? Yes. Do you see what that component does? Yes. Do you see what that? Right. Let me ask you something. If I paid you 80% of all the profits that the company makes, could you stick it together and do it without me? He said, Mr. Otton, you'll never hear from me the rest of your life. So the guy that is actually building out, so I'm in Thailand today speaking to guys and introducing financing into Thailand for the first time. And as a guy said, he said, Rick, no one's ever done this. The only reason I can be here is because I don't have to think about what happens in Indonesia at all. I don't take a phone call. I don't get a problem. I don't get woken up with a this and that broke down. People solve the problems for you when they take 80%. And I'm only bringing these examples in real estate, mate, because I'm in the real estate space. Do you understand? Okay, let me give you another example. No, wait. Let me give you a more current one. You know how I do subliminal science? For the very first time, I've introduced, what has this ever been? I've now introduced subliminal science for real estate, and I brought programs for subliminal science for real estate and subliminal science for business into the US. It's the first country. They're not in England yet. They're not in Europe yet. They've all been done for the US. But I'm not going to spend my whole time knocking on doors and saying, hello, let me tell you about subliminal science for real estate or subliminal science for business. What I did find was a woman, and I said to her, let me ask you something. She's a real estate agent. She's really entrepreneurial. I said, let me ask you something. How would you like to make $1 million this year? What do you think she said?
Of course, would love to.
Of course. Okay, so guess what? I'm teaching her everything about subliminal science to just her. Now, she will take 80% of all the money comes out of the United States. Now, here are the rules. She has to mention in every talk, seminar, keynote speak, blah, blah, she does everything in the world. She has to say, and I learned it all from a guy called Rick Otton. So my brand is on everything. So some Bali Property Finance, as other people use my stuff and I give it away, they've got to carry my brand on it. So that you can use my documents, my forms, but you carry my brand. So my brand is with it. So then what she will do in America, she will keep referring to a guy called Rick Otton and she'll make a lot of money. But there are some people in America who are going to go, you know what? Why are we listening to her when we should go and find this guy called Rick Otton and just write him whatever damn check he wants because he's obviously the best in the world at what he does. So can you see how that kind of works?
Yeah. That's genius. That goes back to your example earlier with the 20-year-old Instagram star, teaching them a little and them branding you and passing on uh, your brand to all his followers.
A guy called me the other day. Actually, guy, I think I might have told you this. A guy called me from Arkansas, and he said he tracked me down. Right? He tracked me down. He said, "I'm calling you from Arkansas, and my name is Arthur." He said, "Hi, Arthur from Arkansas. How can I help you?" He said, "Could I pay you a whole lot of money and you could teach me how to do all these things in real estate?" I said, "First of all, who are you and how did you find out about me?" He said, "I went to a big convention in Florida with all the big American gurus in real estate, and the guy on the stage said, everything I learned from a guy called Rick Otton. And I sat there and I thought, why am I listening to you if you learned it from a guy?" And he tracked me down the internet, found me and rang me up and he said, "Well, you're obviously the guy that taught everybody else in the world. How much are you going to charge?" And I said, "Well, bow your head." He said, "Why?" He said, "Because the price is going to be ugly." But here's the point. I teach the girl and she's excited. She gets to do the corporate stuff. She gets to do the subliminal science. She gets the license to everything I have in the United States, and she takes 80%. But people will know it all came from a guy called Rick Otton, and I'm a lazy bugger, mate. I just want to sit around and someone's going to ring me up and say, like they've done, "Could you come to Dubai and bring the We Buy Houses brand into Dubai?" Because there's no big national brand in Dubai, but everybody knows the We Buy Houses brand. So they want it in Dubai so foreigners feel more comfortable buying from the brand they know, right? But there's also rich people in Dubai who will go, "Well, you can learn sort of golf from anybody, but I want to learn from Tiger Woods."
No, that completely makes sense. And another question, I mean, before the interview, doing some research, and you have a philosophy of being the second smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that for our audience?
Yeah. Okay. Here's what happens. And it comes back to the subliminal science, how we think. We all go to a party or a function or whatever. Okay. Guys are always taught to be leaders. That's what we're all taught. Okay. So we go to the function, the party, we wear our suit, we wear our business card. We tell everybody else who we are, what we've done, how important we are. And all the other males who are in the animal kingdom also, "Well, I'm pretty good too. I'm blah, 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 blah." But there's three drivers that drive the human. Humans want to travel, humans want to spend more time with their family, and humans want to help other humans. It's built into our psyche. We can't help it. When I go there as the second smartest man, what I'll do is I'll go, "Hey, Sean, let me ask you something." Now, as soon as I use your name, the three most important words in your language is the word your name. Gives you a dopamine hit. You know what dopamine is?
That good feeling,
It's a
that
good feeling drug.
excitement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cocaine does the same thing. It opens up your dopamine pipes, but this is a cheaper way of doing it. So dopamine gives you a feel-good hit. There are three words that give you a feel-good hit: your name, the word free, and the word sex. But we're not going to talk about free. We're not going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about your name. When I use your name, I bam, just giving you a dopamine hit. Now I follow and say, "Hey, Sean, let me ask you something." Now, as soon as I say, "Sean, let me ask you something," I've basically said you're the most important man in the world. You're the man that has all information. And I also know that you want to help others be as good as you. So what I've done is I've just seized control of every thought. So if you're talking to other people, you'll shut them out. You go, "Yes, Richard, how can I help you?" And I'll say, "Let me ask you something. I was just thinking about buying houses, in America because I haven't sort of, I'm just wondering how it works." Now, let's say you're a real estate agent. You're thinking, "Well, let me tell you how buying houses works would you like to know about Texas?" "Yeah, tell me how the house buy and work in Texas." If I put myself as the second smartest man, watch the show called Columbo. Have you ever watched Columbo? Do you know who Columbo was?
I've heard of it, haven't watched it.
TV show, everybody knows Columbo. Columbo is always the second smartest man. When you're the second smartest man, people have no anxiety. People don't find you a threat. people lower their guard and tell you everything you want to know. And if you know how to use language and you know how to use subliminal science, you can lead those people to do anything you want them to do because you're not a threat and you're not a danger. Because I'm not too smart. I'm just Rick, right? I'm just Rick, Let me tell you a story about this. When you're the second smartest man, you're no threat to any of the other males. The males always feel, what, this guy is just not that smart. So you'll tell me all the knowledge about everything, all your trade secrets, everything I want to know, because how threatening can I be? Plus, I also know you want to help me be a better person. Now, let me tell you how this can work for you. Back there in about 2006, we were going to the GFC. The Australian banks were in a financial crisis because of foreclosures. You understand what I mean by this?
Yep. They owed more money on the properties. They were shutting them down and repossessing them.
So when banks lose money through foreclosures, they don't lose the money. They have insurance companies that underwrite them and pay them back the money. So the insurance companies take the loss. The insurance companies rang me up and they said, would you like to go to a bankers meeting? I said, what for? And he said, look, they're talking about foreclosures. We're losing a fortune in insurance here. And maybe you've got the answer to solve the foreclosure problem. And I said, well, you know what I look like? I'm in shorts, I'm in flip-flops and a T-shirt. They're all going to be in suits. Don't worry about it. I turn up at this meeting. I walk in with this guy from this insurance company. I'm in shorts, T-shirt and flip-flops. All these guys are in their three-piece secretary slayers all around this big, huge board table. And this guy says, this guy's name's Rick Otton. He's come to solve the problem of the foreclosures that we're having in the banking system. They can imagine. Everybody looked at me like, you're a homeless man. You're a bit of a loser, right? And so they said, so the first question I said is, let me ask you, gentlemen, I understand there's a foreclosure problem. They go, yeah. So why do we have a foreclosure problem? Like, why is there a foreclosure problem? And this banker said to me, goes, Mr. Rotten, we have a foreclosure problem because people aren't paying their home loans. I said, let me ask you something. Is it people aren't paying the home loans or the home loans aren't being paid? I said, well, the home loans aren't being paid. Well, why don't you design a system, a paperwork system, whereby anybody can pay anybody else's home loan? That means every loan becomes a performing loan. There's no loan arrears. You don't have to send 7% of your gross funds to the Fed to keep it 1% interest. You can lend it out to your shareholders at 17%, and you'll massively improve the profits, and you'll have no losses, right? And this other banker looked at this other guy in a three-piece suit and said, you mean I pay you $350,000 a year but what I've just been told by a homeless man how to solve the problem? So 5 years later, they changed the credit code in Australia, and under Article 18A, everybody could transfer their loans to anybody else if they couldn't pay the home loan. So it didn't have to go into default. But it was that whole second smartest man position, right?
That's incredible.
People will tell you how businesses work. If you have a business, let me ask you something, sure. How do you get that to do that? How do you get that to do that? And you're thinking, what threat could I be? Well, I do that with a microprint, blah, 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 and I gather a lot more information and I get a lot smarter by being the second smartest man because I've removed all the intimidation, all the anxiety, all the threat, and people just want to be your best friend.
So how do you combine the situational awareness, say the beginning of the meeting with where people are sitting, with being the second smartest person in the room, with any other ways of structuring the conversation in order to persuade it to get the outcome you want? I mean, it sounds like you have this incredible system that...
Here's the setup. Whenever I go to a meeting, any meeting must have a structure. Most people just have a meeting and then it goes to another meeting and then it goes to another meeting, and companies have meetings and meetings and meetings, right? If I ever have a meeting, I never make it at 4 o'clock, 4:15 or 4:30. People will be late to the meeting. I always make it 7 minutes past 4 or 3:13 or 27 minutes past 3. Everybody will be exactly on time. They'll look at their watch and they'll go, if it's 23 minutes past 3, there must be a reason why Rick called it at 23 minutes past 3. If you call it for 4:30, people are always 15 minutes late. You know when someone says they're 5 minutes, are they ever 5 minutes or are they actually 15 minutes?
Huh.
Right? So always make a meeting on an odd number and people will always turn up exactly on time. Secondly, 5 questions at any meeting. What is the outcome we have to achieve here today? What is the outcome of the meeting? Okay. How much time have we got to get there? Okay. Who else needs to be there? And before I have the meeting, I tell people what the problem is that's being discussed at the meeting, so bring their solutions. So they can't come to the meeting unless they've already got 3 solutions worked out. And that way we're not sitting around for ages talking about what's the solution to the problem. I say, John, what's your solution? Don't like that one. Philip, what's your solution? I like that. Let's expand on that. But you set the time and you've got to set what the outcome's got to be. Now, the thing is, if I go to meetings, it happens to be all the time, my wife hates me for it. My wife, because I never tell anybody I'm the We Buy Houses guy. Most people don't know until much later. And then they go, you're that guy. And I go, well, which guy, right? Because I'm just the second smartest guy. I'm just this guy, right? But here's the point. Like the bankers meeting, people within 5 minutes, what comes out of your mouth, you watch people change. So I might say, geez, Sean, blah, 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 why do you do that? And you'll go, blah, blah, blah. So it's a little bit like I meet you for the first time and you tell me in 5 minutes how investment banking works. And I say, so let me ask you something. When I look at the CQ ratio and how that applies to the yield factor on the blah, 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 does that get affected by the blah or more like the blah, blah, blah? And suddenly you go, holy shit, this guy knows more about investment banking than me. But you would never have known it until I've opened my mouth. You understand?
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
very quickly, that tells people that you know your shit without a business card. I don't carry a business card. Never have. People go, you got a business card? I say, look me up on the internet. I'm everywhere. Look me up on the internet, right? Plus also most business cards end up in the garbage bin anyway. So then also, whenever I have conversations, I only ever, Sean, ask questions. I never deliver information because I understand that you have a belief system. Whatever you believe, I can't change it. I can't tell you you're wrong. You with me? It's like saying, let's say you're Islamic or you're Muslim, and I say, well, you're wrong. I mean, how is that going to go down like a cup of cold sick? It doesn't work. All I can do is ask questions that get you to question the validity of your own belief system.
But say you met someone at a conference and you wanted them to know what you do.
Yeah.
How would you steer the conversation to be able to present to them your value proposition? What you could help them with?
Okay, here's what happens. If I ask you enough questions about yourself, and then eventually when you tell me, and then I shut up and say nothing, right? So when I want you to talk, my hands are always up like this. When my hands are up like this, it actually tells you it's your turn to talk. Subliminal again, right? And then if I want you to talk more, I just
go
like this.
For our audience that's just listening to this on the podcast, Rick has his hands extended forward.
And they're also palms up. Palms up, extended forward, means it's your turn to talk. It's subliminal. You will talk. If I also nod my head, you will continue to talk. And if you stop talking, if I nod some more, you'll keep talking. It's subliminal. You've just been told it's your turn to talk. When I want you to shut up and stop talking, all I need to do is turn my hands over. I turn my hands over, drop my hands, and you'll stop talking. Now the conversation stops, okay? We have silence, right? Someone has to say something. I won't. I know you will say something. What do you think is the first question you'll now ask me?
What are you working on? What are you doing?
Yeah, there we go. Correct. So rather than me telling you what I'm working on, and you think, oh, what a dickhead, mate, big noting yourself, I will ask you about all of you first until eventually there's nothing said. You'll stop talking, and through social courtesy, you'll fill the dead air and say, so what do you do and what are you working on? Right?
Rick, this has been fantastic. We're at the top of the hour. If there's anything that, and I think we could talk for days, to be honest.
Yeah.
If there's what's a takeaway for our audience before wrapping it up? I'll turn my hands up, palms facing you. What information would you like to pass on to our audience of entrepreneurs and investors? Piece of wisdom.
Okay. First of all, a couple of things. Humans never make a logical decision. Everything we decide, everything in life is based on emotions and how we feel about something. I mean, if we made decisions based on logic, we'd all be single. So that's the first thing, right? We all make stuff based on logic. You don't have to know everything. Just know guys that are smarter than you. I don't know that much. I just know a lot of guys that are smarter than me. People say to me all the time, have you been to university, Mr. Otton? No, I haven't, but I employ 7 people who did. What do you want to know? And I'll get back to you. So I don't need to be the smartest guy. And if you're out there want to do something, you don't need to know how to do it. Just find the guys how to know how to do it and plug them all together, right? Also, the thing is, get people to work with you based on attitude. You can always teach skills.
Fantastic. All right. And we're going to have Rick's contact information, his LinkedIn, in the show notes. And I also want to thank one more time Craig Keegan for making this introduction that allowed this interview to happen. And to our audience, if you'd like to look at our past episodes, go to thesiliconvalleypodcast.com to check out our archives. And also, when I'm not the host of the Silicon Valley Podcast, I'm an investment banker focused on mergers, acquisitions, growth capital. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And with that, Rick, I'd love to have you back on the show in the future. I think this was a spectacular conversation, and I'm looking to learn more.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, and once again, Rick, happy birthday.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I just forgot. I just became 1 year younger.